Hello and welcome to Chapter 13, the blood. When we look at blood, first off we're going to look at the constituents of it. It has plasma, and then there are the elements. Blood is a connective tissue because you have cells inside a matrix or fluid. Then we're going to look a little bit about clotting and the blood clot, platelet plug. Blood types we will look at briefly at the disorders and briefly at the studies. Okay, so to begin with, what we're going to do, the whole idea of blood, it's important in maintaining homeostasis. 8% of the body is blood. You have about 5 liters of it. You have functions. There's transportation functions, regulation functions, and protection functions. You're transporting your gases, your carbon dioxide and your oxygen. You are also transporting nutrients, mainly glucose, and you're transporting your waste. And then the waste gets to your kidneys and your liver and your skin and your lungs for removal. In terms of regulating pH, very important for regulating pH. pH has to be at a certain level because your body has to, all the enzymes have to function at a certain pH. pH is also regulated short term by your respiratory system by breathing out carbon dioxide, and long term by your kidneys. Then you also have a fluid balance. Your blood has to have a certain volume for a certain pressure. You regulate your heat through your blood. You may not realize that, but when you get hot, you get flushed. That means more blood supply to your skin. Protection, the white blood cells help protect against disease, and then you have a protection against blood loss, which is the main job of the platelets. Now, when you look at the whole blood, basically you have whole blood has 2 parts to it. You've got your plasma, which is the fluid part, and you have your formed elements. In your plasma, you have proteins. Plasma without proteins is serum. So proteins, these are mainly clotting proteins, and also the proteins that are used in your your osmotic pressure proteins, which we heard about when we talked about your osmotic pressure and circulation of your blood. These are, albumin is the most common protein in your blood. Then when you break down your formed elements, they're called elements because platelets are not true cells, they're partial cells. So you have your leukocytes, which are white, and you have your erythrocytes. So when you look at this, which is basically called the hematocrit, the blood is separated based on a centrifugal force, and the larger parts or the heavier parts go to the bottom. The erythrocytes, or the red blood cells, are the largest part, and they're on the bottom. The white blood cells and the platelets are included in what's called this buffy coat, and then you have the water or the plasma at the top. Okay, when you look at the blood, you have different types of blood cells. The largest blood cells are the white leukocytes. Then the medium size but largest in population is the erythrocytes, or the red blood cell, and then the platelets. Platelets are called cells, but sometimes they're called elements because they're not true cells, they're partial cells. When you look at your blood plasma, 55% of your blood is plasma. It contains water and the proteins albumin, clotting factors, antibodies, and a complement, which we'll talk about later. When you looked at your formed elements, you have your erythrocytes, which are your red blood cells, your white blood cells, which are your leukocytes. Your leukocytes are broken down into neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, lymphocytes, and monocytes. We will only talk briefly about these, and we'll more look at them when we look at the function of blood cells. Then you have your platelets, which are involved in clotting. Okay, first off, and for all of these are produced in the red bone marrow in what are called hemopoietic cells. Hemo meaning blood, hematopoietic, poietic meaning producing. Red bone marrow is found in your main bones, and as you get older, it's reduced to your hip and your ribs and I think maybe your femur. Erythrocytes are the first ones we're looking at. They are biconcave discs. So here are the biconcave discs. Kind of look like rubber dinghies or boats. They have this shape because they have no nucleus in them. One of the last steps is the nucleus is sort of put out. That makes them anuclear. This is important because it gives the cells this more flexible structure, which allows them to go through the small capillaries. However, they only last about 120 days, so very short-lived cells. The red blood cells are red because of the iron in the molecule hemoglobin. So heme is the iron molecule, and the heme is a result of iron. The iron attracts 4 oxygen molecules, and it's that attraction for oxygen that allows the hemoglobin to carry oxygen so efficiently. Oxygen is not dissolved in the blood plasma. It is carried in the hemoglobin molecule, and there's millions of hemoglobin molecules in each blood cell. So the hemoglobin has a couple of functions. Main function of hemoglobin is to transport oxygen. A smaller function of hemoglobin is to transport hydrogen ions, and a very small, insignificant amount of carbon dioxide is carried on the hemoglobin. Most of it is dissolved as hydrogen carbonate that is in the blood plasma. We'll talk about it later. When we look at the second type of cells, it is the leukocytes. Leuko means white. Leukemia is a cancer of white blood cells. So the white blood cells are colorless and round with a prominent nucleus. However, they are usually stained in most pictures you see. So the white blood cells are white, but they do have this large purple nuclei. The different types of white blood cells have a different type of nuclei. So when you look at the nuclei, they can have sort of a barbell shaped. They can also have a band shape, and that's in the different stages. When you look at them, they have granulocytes. See how these have little grains in them? These are granulocytes. Granulocytes are basically just grains, and they separate the types of white blood cells. You have agranulocytes and granulocytes. Their main job is to clean the body of foreign debris, cellular debris, and to fight pathogens. You may have heard the word lymphocyte, macrophage. These are the ones that clean up. They undergo the process of phagocytosis, and in phagocytosis they can go out through the red blood, the blood vessel. With histamine, the blood vessel gets leaky. It results in the lymphocytes to leave the vessel, and as a result, they can surround a bacterium. The bacterium will then fuse with a vesicle such as a lysosome, and then they will spit out the digestive process here, or the digestive products later on. Very important. Phagocytosis is happening in your body right now. A normal healthy immune system normally has lots of phagocytosis going on all the time. Third component is the platelets or the thrombocytes. Thrombo is a clotting word. Thrombosis is a clot. So cytes, thrombocytes, they are the smallest formed elements. They're not cells. They don't have nuclei or DNA. They are fragments released from the megakaryocytes, which we'll look at when we talk briefly about blood development. And they are very essential for blood coagulation or clotting. We'll talk briefly about clotting, although it is a very large, complicated process with both basically 2 pathways, 12 clotting factors. We're going to look at it pretty simply. So here's the megakaryocytes. The megakaryocyte is a type of blood cell in your bone marrow. it will produce these granular, or these, what's the word I want? Platelets. And the platelets will then be exocytosed out of the body. Sorry, out of the cell into the blood. Now, very important. So just to summarize, red blood cells, oxygen transport, a small amount of hydrogen transport, a small amount of carbon dioxide transport. White blood cells fight infection. We'll get more into that when we talk about immunity. And then thrombocytes, clot or coagulation. Coagulation is very important because it prevents blood loss when the vessel ruptures. And this will include contraction of smooth tissue, a formation of a platelet plug, which will quickly plug it. Then you have a blood clot. And in the blood clot, you have a bunch of conversions going on. The main one is taking the prothrombin and converting it into thrombin using an enzyme, prothrombinase. Notice the ASE ending is a enzyme. So you have the pro, meaning inactive form. It's good to have a lot of prothrombin floating around in your body so that way it's ready to go, but you don't want it to clot. Then once you have the thrombin made, the thrombin will then act as the enzyme to convert fibrinogen into fibrin. So if you look at it, there is an injury. A result of the injury will cause the damage to the cells, and that will result in prothrombin being released. So the prothrombin will be released. The prothrombinase, along with calcium, very important, along with calcium will act converting prothrombin into thrombin. Thrombin now acts as the enzyme to convert fibrinogen into these fibrin threads. Fibrin will then form these threads, and as they are forming these threads, the cells will get caught in the threads. So that will create the platelet plug. Then later on, more cells come in and you end up with clotting. That's enough for blood components. I'll continue on in part 2 in another video.